Here's a fact about detectives. A recent trend has emerged from the video essay space to see which fictional detectives can solve cases from other pieces of fiction. The most notable being the Kira case from Death Note, one of the most notoriously crazy cases in fiction. Other cases that have been put up to the test include the Bay Harbor Butcher case, aka Dexter, the Heisenberg case, and specifically the third case in Ace Attorney Justice for All. Why that case specifically? Couldn't tell ya. So you know what? Why don't I throw my hat into the ring as well? But what case am I covering? Well, I thought about it long and hard, and I realized that there was only one case that I wanted to cover, and that is, my own parents' murder. I have picked out a variety of detectives and detective-adjacent characters from all of fiction to put up to the task of figuring out who took my mom and dad away from me on that fateful night. Let's solve this case. Let's begin with easily the most iconic detective in history, Sherlock Holmes. A man that doesn't even need to be introduced, so I'm just going to answer the question. It simply depends on the adaptation. Of course, the original from Arthur Conan Doyle would be able to solve it no problem. Also, the BBC Sherlock and the one that goes to the 22nd century would solve the case. As for the versions that couldn't, the Sherlock from the 2009 movie, the one played by Robert Downey Jr. Just him. He sucks. Next up is our first superhero detective, Batman, who also needs no introduction. The Dark Knight himself. This is also dependent on the adaptation. All of them would arrest a guy, but I think the best of them, such as animated Nolan Trilogy and Lego Batman, would be able to find the true culprit. Some may accidentally catch the wrong guy and have a whole character arc when they realize their mistake and try to correct it, unlike some people. Our next detective is Columbo from Lieutenant Columbo. Unlike our last two characters, there's only one Columbo as far as we know, so there's only a simple yes or no answer to this question, and obviously, Columbo's usual tactics would be no match for this case. Or, if you did your own research, you'd find out that Columbo is a surrogate of a larger, eldritch, omnipotent being that is actually watching criminals as they do crimes, and that's how Columbo always seems to be on the money. Next up is Nancy Drew. Now, Nancy has shown herself to be capable of solving many cases, but maybe this time, she should sit this one out, lest she gets the wrong guy. Now, the Scooby Gang are at their best when the crime is currently being committed, so unless the gang were at my parents' house at 3 AM on an otherwise regular night, which isn't very likely, this one is a case where they do get away with it. Because of those meddling, actually no, that doesn't work the way I wanted it to. It's time to move on to L, short for... Wait, what the... It's not actually short for anything? That doesn't matter. L is in a similar boat as Columbo, where his pedigree is on another level, so it's safe to say he won't take the L. We've now arrived at a more recent character, Benoit Blanc from Knives Out. The world's greatest detective, or so he's called. As you may be shocked to find out, Blanc is actually really bad at Among Us. Like, really bad. What kind of detective is bad at Among Us? In his cases, we've only seen 3 of them, but I could solve them myself. But at the same time, I managed to solve this case, so yeah, I think he could solve it. Now this one is a bit weird, but Tintin is on the Wikipedia list of fictional detectives, so he counts. Unfortunately, Tintin is canonically dead, as the series ends with Tintin being dragged to his execution, and dead men can't solve cases until we get to Sissel. It's time we talk about Ace Ventura. And while Ventura is a very goofy character, he is still a very competent detective. He just chooses to solve cases related to pets. Luckily, the initial suspect did run over a deer before he allegedly killed my parents, and that's kinda like a pet. Though he may lose interest once he figures out the real culprit. But this video isn't would they want to solve my parents' murder, it's could they, and I think Ace could. The Ace Attorney Phoenix Wright only gets involved in cases once someone has been arrested, usually the person who didn't do the crime. Luckily, this is the exact circumstances that this crime was committed, and maybe Wright would actually defend his client instead of just making him sign a plea deal. Let's move on to Inspector Clouseau of Pink Panther fame. Now, what you have to understand about the Pink Panther films is that they're slapstick comedy, so Clouseau will probably get up to various antics and break a lot of my inheritance, but would still probably figure it out. Now, Inspector Zenigata from Lupin III is a very good cop. He's just locked in a never-ending battle with Lupin, and our killer is no Lupin. The problem is he's a member of Interpol, and this crime happened in the United States, so poor Koichi over here is out of luck. If it was in any other country, it would have been fair game, but no well. Up next is John Constantine. Now, John is a very good detective, but the thing is, he doesn't really work for any police department. Instead, he sends the caught crook straight to hell, which I think the killer deserves. He might get the wrong guy, but hell can just spit him back out. It's not like he's gonna racially profile anyone or anything. Our next detective is Stephen Blue, but here's the thing about these two, they can't solve a case without your help. So this is actually up to you. Do you think you can solve this case? Let us know in the comments below. Now on to someone who technically qualifies for this list. Inspector Gadget, who doesn't actually do any of the detective work, so we're gonna have to push this burden onto his niece, Penny, and her dog, I wanna say, Spike? But unfortunately, Penny mostly does work on cases involving Saturday morning cartoon villains, not murders. She clearly wouldn't be capable of solving something on this level. Next on this list is Adrian Monk. The thing about Monk is that he has OCD, aka Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and well, have you seen my parents' house? It would be a nightmare for him. I remember, they would always put the pepper on the left and the salt on the right, even though it should be left salt, right pepper. They don't call it pepper and salt, and their home was filled with it. I mean, stuff like that. I think Monk would die if he tried to investigate. Now for our first duo, Sam and Max. Similar to Clouseau, I forgot how to pronounce it, Sam and Max are pretty crazy detectives. However, Sam and Max aren't actually the best detectives. Wait, I just remembered they have point-and-click games. Scratch that. Yeah, never mind. They'd probably bump into the culprit, mostly because he is, or was, their next-door neighbor. Next up is the recurring Pokemon character Looker, a member of the Pokemon equivalent of Interpol, which unfortunately means, as before, he has no jurisdiction in the United States. Okay, I don't know why this guy is on this list, but Detective Conan O'Brien. I don't know if this guy ever did any detective work. I checked his IMDb page, but nothing came up. Unfortunately, until I get evidence of this guy's detective work, I'm gonna have to say he can't solve this case. Up next is Basil of Baker Street, the little rodent that lives in Sherlock Holmes' abode. Unfortunately, god damn it, I should have said Holmes, home. Shit, whatever. Unfortunately, because Basil is a really small mouse, he probably would have a hard time solving a human case. Now it's time to do the Danganronpa lightning round. Let's go over the cast of the Danganronpa games. Alright? 3, 2, 1, none of them solve it because I hate Danganronpa, and any of you try to convince me otherwise, I will put you in the 4th game myself. Alright, now that our lightning round is over, let's move on to the Hardy Boys. Now, the Hardys are kind of like Nancy Drew. In fact, Nancy was created because John Hardy Boys wanted a female version of the brothers. Now, you may think that this means the Hardy Boys would fail the case, but I think they could pull it off. But only because there's 2 of them. If there were 2 Nancy Drews, I think they could pull it off as well. Moving on to someone a bit more bizarre, Rorschach comes off as a very competent detective. However, if you read between the lines, you may reconsider. You see, Rorschach at one point in the comic tells a story of a clown named Pagliacci, who sees a doctor due to depression, and the doctor tells him to see himself. Okay, to be fair, Rorschach did tell it way better. But what if I told you that Pagliacci is Italian for clowns? Now you may ask what this means. Well, what kind of clown would name himself Clowns? That would be like if John Magician called himself Magicians. This must mean that this story didn't actually happen, but Rory doesn't disclose this, which means he's a liar. But sometimes you have to lie to find the truth, so you know what? He can solve it. Now let's fly to London to check on Professor Layton. Layton was designed after Sherlock Holmes, but he was also designed to contradict the flaws of fellow DS detective Phoenix Wright. One of which is the fact that Layton doesn't need anyone to be framed to get involved, so he'll do it better than Nicholas Wright. Now let's fly back to the Bay Harbor where we discuss a detective who's gotten popular because he knows who the Bay Harbor Butcher is. He just can't prove it. However, James isn't dealing with the very calculating Dexter this time. It is simply their next door neighbor, who hit them with a glass mug. I think Dokes would solve this easily. Let's move on to another cop. Judy Hopps was able to solve 2 of Zootopia's most elusive cases. However, she would have not been able to pull this off without Nick Wilde, her foxy friend. And since I never said Judy and Nick, Judy is on her own, and unfortunately she fails without her partner. Now you may ask why I don't just give her Nick, and I say, well, if you're so smart, why don't you make your own darn list with your own darn parents? Moving on to someone I mentioned earlier, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective Sissel. Due to Sissel's ability to travel back in time, he would not only solve this case but prevent it. and also stop the car from crashing into their home, which wouldn't have killed them, but would be nice. Now next up is... hold on, this isn't right, I already covered Sherlock Holmes. Oh wait, Sherlock Holmes. Oh, Sherlock Holmes, I see what's going on here. You just made Sherlock a girl. Now, I did say that Sherlock could solve this case, and the fact that he's woman now shouldn't change that, but you know what? I'm gonna say she can't. Just out of spite. Alright, it's time for a change of pace. Detective Pikachu specializes in Pokemon-based crimes, and unless that drunk driver ran over his Stantler, I doubt he would be much help. Let's set sail to Philadelphia, where it's always sunny, and Serpico/Charlie Kelly is next to be judged. And he's a very unique case, as I believe Charlie, under his Serpico persona, would be able to crack this case open. However, his reasoning would be so obtuse and strange that it muddies the waters, burying real evidence in the process. Up next is Nick Valentine. Now, I don't know much about Fallout or Nick Valentine, so I privately DM'd a user named I Wanna Kiss Nick Valentine for their opinion, and they said, yes. Take a trip to Japan and we're face to face with one of the many persona detectives that I will pick out of this hat. And we have Adachi, the guy who Persona 4 spoilers. Now I think he would totally figure it out by Persona 4 spoilers. Let's continue with game-based detectives with the Chaotix. Now, while these are Sonic characters, they are from the only good game in the series, Sonic Heroes, so, I don't know, I'm gonna have to say no. They seem to be good at search and rescues, but not much else. Let's make our way to another superhero detective. Spider Noir is an alternate universe version of Spider-Man who is a detective. Now, Spider-Man does sometimes go against the law to dish out his own justice, which he will have to do in this case. The Eye. Who the fuck is this? Alright, I'm tired of doing proper transitions, so I'm just gonna list off names now. Detective from the show of the same name and Gravity Falls. In the show, a detective's adventures seem to parallel the main shows, so could the Mystery Gang... wait, that's not right. Could the Mystery Shack Gang solve this case? Well... wait, why don't I just talk about them? Dipper and Mabel could probably not solve the case because of the rules of the show decreeing that Dipper will get very close, but then he has to sacrifice his lead for Mabel, that selfish bitch. Jessica Fletcher is an in-universe author of crime novels and amateur sleuth. Unfortunately, this case might be too hard for an amateur sleuth. And I know I've denied every woman so far on this list, I'm aware of this. That is not my fault, however. We just need better female detectives, preferably ones that are different and not just Sherlock Holmes. Alright, let's move on to Detective Dick Gumshoe. Gumshoe is not really good at his job, but I think he could solve it because anybody could figure out what is truly going on here, and anybody who does it is an idiot and... an idiot. Almond Cookie from Cookie Run is, as the name suggests, a cookie. A weirdly hot one, too. Come on, John, get it together. Unfortunately, Almond Cookie won't be able to crack this case because of his partner, Cookie Monster with a detective hat, who will also not be able to solve this case because he would be too busy eating Almond Cookie. Mako from the Legend of Korra would probably be the one who would tell me that it was the drunk driver who killed them, and the reason why my neighbor's fingerprints appeared on the glass is because the glass was his and my parents borrowed it, which is bullshit, by the way. The Paw Patrol. Sure, fuck it, why not? Wishbone the dog would be able to solve this case on the condition that he dons the persona of Sherlock or anyone else I've mentioned who can solve this case. Sherlock Gnomes is literally just Sherlock Holmes, but a gnome. He could solve it. The problem solvers are the worst thing to ever happen in the history of animation, and if I even ever have to think about looking at it again, I'll do my own murder. I don't know if they'll solve the case, though. John Detective would easily be able to solve this case and be able to figure out why the true culprit was at the bar when it happened, according to 20 people that were there. I mean, come on, how could 20 whole people remember just one guy? Isn't that suspicious? He would solve this better than anyone. Freddy Fish is a coward. She would just willingly accept the official story that a car just went through their house. Their neighbor clearly did it. Think about it. Who just dies in a car crash? There has to be more to it. But the detectives at the station just said I was acting hysterical and offered me grief counseling just to get me to shut up. But I know the truth. Why would I lie about this? After all, he did touch me. is what I would say if he did that, but he didn't, so I'm not going to say he did. You know what, maybe I should switch to a different detective, so I'm not talking about this gruesome case with Freddy Fish in the background. Alright, Wonder Pets! Well, that's not much better. Maybe we could, oh wait, the list ends here. Thank you for watching Facts About Truthers. If you like the video, subscribe to the Literary channel, do some independent research on this case. Wait, don't actually do that, you might find out my real name. Next time, we'll be talking about the worst film remake I've ever seen.